Hello friends, this is the chart that we are going to look at today, and I'm going to call this video type Karyotype Reappears. The reason is because of this formation right here in the Schumann Resonances. In my last video, we discussed this aspect that I called the armor of God, and this little particle, which looked like a virus particle, going through and getting blasted by the light, by human intention saying no. Now what happens? The particle proceeds and it reforms. Why does it reform? Because of the intention of the dark forces right here. That's what's hiding behind this reformed virus karyotype. Do you see that? Okay, so this right here is hidden. You see how it's kind of sneaky in the background? Let's make that a little bit bigger so we can really look at you. There's the hidden intention. Do you see how it's dominated by the red colors and the yellow colors? This is kind of the shadow aspect of humanity, the shadow behind what appears to be human. So you can see the virus particle. This is the trail. It got blasted apart, and then here it is, barely nothing. And now, look, these people, do you see how this almost looks like images of a couple of people here? Two very specific people right there. Okay, one of them clearly looks human, and the other one looks lizard-like. I don't know. How would you describe this shape if it was going to be a being right here on the left? I don't know. Anyway, and now see here, there's another human being behind them. There's actually three beings in particular, and they're surrounded by the shadow, the forces of darkness. Okay, so they reach down. Do you see that? See that reach right there? They reach down and attempt to re-energize this storyline of the virus particle. See that? Right there, and they touch it. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? What happens immediately after that? The karyotype reforms. So I'm telling a story here. I do look at the data on the charts, the scientific data, and I also bring in an intuitive analysis. So if this is the first time you're watching that, that's my approach. The way that I look at the energies in this chart and the resonances is from a perspective of quantum physics. And I also look at the interdimensional nature of these energies. There were 7 attempts to reignite the virus karyotype here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's something interesting about this part, this karyotype right here, that I want to point out. I call this stamping, where the tap of the karyotype has not actually been able to form, but instead looks like stamps, like from when we were children and you play with the ink stamps and you just do that. You make patterns, right? Well, these stamps are, I'm going to call them stamps. It's like they're packets of information that's attempting to be downloaded into our system. And when I say system, I mean human society in general, because really this is a global effect. Every country in the world is affected. I was listening to the president's press briefing this morning, and I believe he said 182 countries are now affected by the hidden enemy. So here's the hidden enemy on full display, or aspects of the mechanics of how that hidden enemy works. I want to be clear that I'm not saying that there's anyone or anything or any place that is particular that is at play here, although there do appear to be two or three people that are involved, as we just talked about, that are pretty key. But there are people behind them too. See this, like this red devil here? Anyway, when I look at those images, I'm shifting, letting my vision shift so that it goes clairvoyant. And when that happens, the images in the chart sort of come alive for me. It's an interesting technique, and it's one that you'll find in, if you've ever been in the dentist or doctor's office and look at children's books, and they have all the little patterns, and they ask you, can you see the pattern that's hidden in this sparkles of color on the page? And if you allow your mind to just slightly shift, the pattern will pop out. Well, that is a way of accessing and learning to access a type of clairvoyance. What is clairvoyance? Clairvoyance is basically, I believe it's basically a talent that resides in the pineal gland of a human being, and that we all have access to these, I call them clairs, clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience, and so on. But the pineal gland is what allows us to see other dimensions while we're in this dimension, and it allows us to perceive images in our minds. If you ever have a vivid dream or that sort of thing, it's now, this is my belief, and it's come through my lived experience as to how this pineal aspect works and interacts with and creates a clairvoyant or other non-physical experience. That's my 2 cents on that. Let's get back to the chart. So we were talking about these karyotypes that attempted to download into the system again. You can see that the download was not successful. There was a first major attempt here, and even the lines were formed. But the top of the karyotype was blown out by the higher light, this white resonance. So the resonances on this chart, there's 4 of them. They are color-coded, and I'm just going to call them by their color. On the data charts, they're listed as resonance 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I thought that would be boring and also hard to relate to the colors. So we're going to call them by the colors. So the top here is blown out, but the lines of the karyotype are able to form. Now let me show you something fascinating. I just want to give you a reminder. This image is from my first video on the topic. There's the dog barking again. He's trying to bark away this parasitic invader, apparently. That's how I'm interpreting his bark. So do you see that? See these lines here? Okay. When did that first appear in the Schumann Resonance? It appeared here on January 11th. Local time on this chart. This chart is from the Space Observing System in Tomsk, Russia. What is the date that China announced its first coronavirus victim? January 11th. So I don't know how all these things come to show up on the Schumann Resonance. I just know that they're there. So my job is just to describe them and point them out. The mechanics of how this is done, and if there's any technology at play or it's just human consciousness, that's an open question for me. I don't know the answer to that. So if you could imagine this chart, now this is a chart from January 11th, at the first perfect download, the forces that created this were able to create a perfect karyotype, the most perfect of all the weeks that I've tracked this, going even back to the fall to now, fall of 2019. But they were not able to fully download it into the planet, into the human population. That's what this shows me down here. That's because the green resonances overwhelmingly tend to represent, in my view, humanness, a human frequency. So the human population ultimately is not in agreement with this, and that is why the karyotype could not get down to the bottom. Look at this. In these karyotypes here, you see a consistent, and you can't see that. Let me move this chart up. You see that the patterning is consistent all the way down to the bottom. There's still going to be lines. And we see that that was not able to happen here. So the first download, it was perfect. It was beautiful. It was well done. But it did not fully download. Remember that. That should give us hope here and give us hope that this virus is ultimately not going to take hold. However long this takes effect, this takes to work its way out through the physical. In the first karyotype, I explained why these images showed what was going to happen in a big overall theme. So if you want to understand that, you can go back to that video. The download occurs from top to bottom, from the top of the chart to the bottom of the chart. That's how the movement of energy appears to go to me. So the bottom of the chart is closest to our lived reality. That's how I perceive it after looking at this chart for a very long time. And in our lived reality, ultimately, the blue and the green step forward and protect the human population, and we thrive on. That's how I read this. Now, let's go back to what's happening today and yesterday. Okay, so this is the chart from April 6th local time, and I want to address what happened. I've mentioned in other videos that every time the virus is defeated by an action of human beings, for example, this armor of God activity, where there was a mass meditation, number one, led by Cobra and others, and I put links in that video to that event if you guys are interested. Number two, it was Palm Sunday. And what does Palm Sunday represent? Palm Sunday represents Jesus Christ entering the city of Jerusalem victorious. This is from the blog article. All of my videos are linked to articles on my blog, and in the articles often I will put a little bit more detail. But on Palm Sunday, it celebrates Christ arriving in Jerusalem with a greater purpose than the people at that time knew. And his purpose was the defeat of darkness on this earth. The third major factor going on in that armor of God light was this: the Prime Minister of India asked his people, all 1.3 billion of them, to meditate on this day and to light candles in solidarity and peace, saying we must defeat the deep darkness of the crisis by spreading the glory of light in all four directions. So these were powerful factors that all came together. There was also an astrological impact, and there are other people that have videos on that. So here you have the karyotype being downloaded. As it starts downloading, it's already partly defeated up here by the light. And again, the human aspect of this is that we don't agree, and the karyotype patterns cannot fully download here. These are not red and yellow going down here. This has become green. So the human population says no, and this is a global event. So it's a global human reaction. There are several attempts here, as you can see. I'll make it bigger, okay, to re-download right here. I don't know how this is done technologically, but this is what you're seeing. It could be a reflection of consciousness of all of us as well, and the consciousness, not just of our light side, but our dark side or our shadow. Because those who we feel act out of dark intentions really represent the shadow of humanity. Each one of us, just like the yin and yang symbol, it takes the yin and the yang, the dark and the light, to make the whole circle. Each one of us has the light and the shadow within our energy field. We are both. And when we've aligned with divine intention for us, our soul path, with God, the Most High, the Creator, however you wish to describe that for yourself. When you're in that center, in alignment with that, and you're letting that flow through you, you're in a balanced state. When you choose one side over another, we come out of balance. So this effect here, where I said that this was the intention of the dark, this is a group that fully embodies the darkness and hides their light, as opposed to people who try to fully embody the light and hide their darkness. Ultimately, to be fully successful as a human being in terms of embodying the fullness of your soul, we have to address and recognize both our dark aspects and our light. That means looking at what's hidden in the shadow aspects of ourselves, of our personalities, and healing and addressing those. And by doing that, we heal the world outside of us, because energy in physics, energy that is in motion is always in motion. So your energy field is always emitting, like a beacon, if you will. And as that beacon that as that ball of light that you are, that looks like a physical human being, okay, because the physical body is made of light that is just packed denser together than the air around us. So as you shift within and you become in that balanced state, like the yin and the yang balanced within you, what happens is that beacon that you are, right? The energy of the sphere of your energy field is always in motion, right? It's always emitting from you without you even thinking about it, because that's just physics. You shift what you emanate, and it changes the world around you without you doing anything. In fact, if you try to intend to do something, usually that subverts the whole thing. Oh, there are the trumpets. Should we take that as agreement? Okay, so let's get back to this. The other thing that's attempting to be downloaded here is these stamps. And the thing about the stamps is that they feel like packets of information. So here we have the representation in energy of the physical virus, and maybe even the virus of parasitic influences upon human beings. And we are unaware of these, but we're becoming aware of these as this process unfolds. But here in the stamps, these are almost like packets of ideas that are attempting to be downloaded into our thoughts and then played out into our actions. So we can say yes or no to these. And this is the true power of the human being. Our true power, and I discussed this on the Armor of God video, so I'll link that below. Our true power is that when we're aligned with that light inside of us that represents the part of God that created us, the part of the Creator that created us, and then we step forward and we say, I am not in alignment with this. I do not consent. That's when our ability to affect our world comes into play. And the fact is, you don't need to walk out into the street, go out and hold up a sign to do this. What you feel resonates within you. You voice it to yourself, even just in your heart and your mind. And there's a lot of people around the world that cannot voice, okay? They cannot give voice. They cannot communicate outside of their own being anything that is contrary to what their governments say. You guys can do this and still have an impact. And so can all of us. Maybe you're not someone that writes publicly. Maybe you're someone that doesn't talk about certain issues, but you can still have a voice. And let me give you an example. I have a girlfriend. And this was a wonderful experience. I was sitting with her watching television, and I noticed how she was acting during the news. And because I'm an intuitive and I had met her at a personal growth / spiritual seminar, I had a sense that she was somehow energetically or spiritually interacting with the news. And this person's also a prayerful type of person, a Christian in their religion. So I said to her, are you praying and setting intentions about the news, about the stories that you hear? Because I knew that she was doing it even though she wasn't speaking out loud, and that's because I'm an intuitive. She looked at me and she said, yes. And I said to her, are you setting intentions that this or that does not occur or does occur? And she said, yes. And I said, when you do that, do you see that the news changes? And she said, yes. Now take this story for what you will. But here's the bottom line of how this type of energy working occurs. It has to be done through that connection with your own soul, from that place that's hard to describe in words, that rises up within you and says this is what's in the highest good. And then when I do this kind of work, I always add that it be in the highest good of all. So for example, when I look at an attempt to download a virus into the human population, in myself I say, I do not consent. And then I leave it to God. I give it to God. And this was taught to me by a wonderful woman from the Bronx who I met on an airplane many years ago. And she spent the entire flight witnessing to me, basically, and explaining how she gives her problems to God. And I just found that so helpful, and I bless this beautiful lady. I don't know her name or anything. She was going to training for a financial company on the West Coast, or maybe it was on the East Coast, and we were flying back to New York. I don't remember, but I remember what she taught me, to give it to God. So when I set intentions, I have now declared that all of my intentions are always with the caveat in the highest good of all, in alignment with divine law. So I give that to God. I make my human intention, the way I feel from inside comes up within me. And this isn't about emotion. It's not about mental acuity. And I discussed this in the Armor of God video. It's about aligning with that light within. And it's a very personal thing. So when we give it to God, we leave the circumstances, the details, to that force that is much greater than we are as simple human beings who can't really know the greater picture and how the unfoldment of that picture is in the highest good. But I also declare with my knowing that all that occurs and any darkness that occurs on this earth is transmuted by the highest light, by the Creator. It is transmuted to the highest good of all. And I keep that trust with me when I make these declarations and intentions. Now let's look at the data. What happened here is that the Q factor, the quality of the human or green resonance, has been up at 31. Okay, and this is a normal pattern. But during the rollout of this virus, every time the human quality hit 31, the virus karyotype would reappear. The way that I knew that we have a handle on this karyotype is that now the quality of the green frequency can consistently be at 31 without constant downloads of the karyotype. So you see here, the only place that it was downloaded was here from 8 a.m. to 12 on this chart. Okay, and then that happened when the quality of these other resonances spiked. Sorry. But what you want to see here is that the quality of the red, which in this chart today is representing the shadow aspect or the dark forces. Do you see how on a relative basis it spiked many multiples greater than the spikes in the white frequency, and there was sort of barely a spike in the yellow on a relative basis. So there was a huge effort forward, and this huge effort occurred right here at 8 a.m., which is when the most full aspect of the karyotype was able to reassert itself at 8. And it did it for an hour, which is interesting because when it appeared first on January 11th local time in the charts, it also lasted for an hour. And also this karyotype plus stamping or thought this is almost like a mind, an offer to mind control us, okay? That was downloaded at 1400 hours, and it also lasted about an hour. So there's something about this effect lasting an hour for those of you who are attempting to counter it. I'm sure that that's already been noticed. Okay, so here, do you see that every time in this 8 a.m. to 1400 hour period, every time the green resonance spiked to 31, that is when the karyotype reasserted right there. Okay, there were 7 tries and there were 7 spikes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then this looks like a flat top, but it actually spikes twice. Do you see? It spiked there and then there. Yeah, there's like a little half a spike there, but basically let's just round it to 7 times. Okay, there you go. So during the initial outbreak of the virus, what happened was that our human quality, the quality of our resonance for the human population ended up having to stay basically around 5 or slightly higher than 5, because anytime it spiked anywhere from about 14 to 31, that's when the karyotype was able to reassert itself. So just sharing this information with you guys, and I hope that it can be put to good use. There's another aspect here that happened, and I just want to show you here the amplitude, okay? Now, this amplitude of the red frequency spikes at 8 a.m. At 8 a.m., the amplitude of the green frequency is slightly backed off. I'm laughing because I can feel the interplays of energy here, and it's just... I basically, it's almost like I can feel what the thinking is here, and I'm going to share that with you. Here's what it looks like to me. Because you see when the amplitude of the green frequency then really spikes, goes up to 32. On a, relative to itself, it significantly spikes at 10 a.m. Let's look at what happened on the chart at that time. Boom, 10 a.m. What happens? So you first had this frequency at 8, then at 9, it reasserted itself pretty full, well-formed. Now look what happens at 10. It can barely manage to be present. That coincides with the amplitude or the strength of the human frequency raising up. And after that, the karyotype cannot fully form. So this is why I was laughing, because the amplitude here is not very strong, but the amplitude of the red spikes. And there's something that I've been watching in this chart that I want to share with you today, and then this will be the end of the story today. So what I want to share with you is it's almost like a trap, a game of cat and mouse that's going on here. By not fully asserting the strength of the human frequency, it invites in the forces that are promulgating the virus karyotype to step forward and try again. And there's the dog barking. He says no. He says back off, you guys. You guys aren't allowed. Dang, every time he barks, it's so fascinating. Actually, it's 2 dogs. They're barking them away now. So what happens is there's a little offer. Okay, we're not that strong. Woohoo! We're going to try this download again. Bam! We fooled you. Comes in real strong, blows out the download. That's what it looks like to me.